so I ran away and I ran back up to my room because I looked crazy. I literally ran away. And I went back in my room and I was like, oh my God, you cannot be here. Look at me. You know, I can't believe this. What do you mean you're filming this? And he was like, open the door. I'm not opening the door. So he was like, Sheila, open the door. Open the door. And he was on his knee, and that's when he proposed.
Oh.
And I said yes. And so I said yes. So we were engaged after that. And I think at that point, we knew that the odds of him living weren't good. Mm-hmm. Doctors had told us as much. But I think what we were thinking was that he had proved them wrong like several times. Like they had told us he wasn't gonna make it through that weekend. There was another time where they said that they didn't think he would make it past a week, and he had like proved them wrong several times. And so I think in our minds, we thought he's gonna live a lot longer than you guys think. You know, I don't know if at that point we still thought we were praying for healing, but I don't think like we didn't see absent like a miracle. We didn't see an avenue for how it happened medically, but we were praying that, you know, God would just miraculously heal him. And so that was around August of 2013 that we got engaged.
Okay. And, you know, as a witness to the wedding, I remember the week of, it was like, how many days did you all prepare before you all actually did the wedding? Because I was like, this can't be happening in 5 days. You know, it was like 5 days, wasn't it? Yeah. I was like, and let me just encourage you, you know, let's say how encouraged I was, because I know that, you know, you probably got a lot of flack from those that were around you. Why are you doing this? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was definitely a bold statement to say, I'm going to stand by this man in spite of the fact that his health is failing him. I love him, first of all, as my brother in Christ, but secondly, now I love him as someone who I want to marry. So what was the conversations that you were having outside of Nick that was possibly helping you to decide this decision to say, yes, let's go forward, and not only accept as a proposal, but now you're talking getting married. Tell me how that worked for you.
So, you know, since I entered the courtship, I knew that he had already told me that he wanted to marry me. And so, you know, one of the reasons why it took me so long to answer him, he didn't tell me at that point. But what to answer him in the first place is because I had to make a lot of decisions about, well, you know, what if he doesn't get well? Like, what if, you know, all of this kind of stuff, and like, what am I willing to be able to say honestly that I can live with? And I can say that, you know, with Nick, since I first met him that first day, he was laying on the floor with the flu. I always loved him. Like, I loved him. I had such like brotherly, sisterly affection toward him. Like, I loved Nick. Nobody could say nothing bad about him. Like, I loved him. He was always there for me. He was always helpful. And I always loved him. So I already had a strong love and connection with him. Like, before I even thought about anything romantic toward him. Mm-hmm. So I love Nick, and there wasn't a lot that I wasn't going to do for him. Like, I would do anything for him. Simply because of the fact that I really loved him and could depend on him, and he was great, you know, he was really great. In terms of, so I had considered a lot of things because I had to. When people have cancer, sometimes, you know, the doctors talk to you about long-term consequences, or if they're going to be able to do this and do that. And he was very honest with me about those things, and I had to seriously, you know, pray about those things and take into consideration, was I going to be able to do that? One of the things that was also really special about Nick is like, he always accepted me. I felt like really secure in the fact that I knew that he loved me, and he loved me in spite of like the days when I could be really ugly. And that didn't affect like how he was with me. Mm-hmm. So that kind of was something like I felt like really safe with him, and really like secure in like knowing like that this was something that God was doing in him. Because like he would tell me that, like sometimes I would feel guilty because I would be fussing or something about whatever. And then of course he was great about it. And so then I would feel bad because I have, you know, he's sick and, you know, all of this stuff. And then I had the nerve to be mad and, you know, and he would be like, Sheila, that's not like, I appreciate your apology, but you know, I don't love you just because I love you, because it's a commitment and I feel like God has called me to love you. And so there's nothing you can do that's going to cause me to love you any less. Like there. And those are the types of things he would say to me, you know. I always felt really accepted by him. I felt like he understood me in so many ways. So it wasn't really going to be a lot that people could say to me, I don't think. That, I mean, people did, because what I was choosing to go through by accepting was a big thing. So, I mean, no, I don't think people that were close to me, they did. They were like, you're choosing to suffer. You know, people said that to me. Like, you realize you're choosing to suffer. And I look at it that way, even though that is what I chose, because that is what I did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this, like you said, that was a commitment. This is the way he committed to loving you through your ups and downs of emotions. You know, you were choosing to love him by giving him this thing he wanted to do. He wanted to make you his wife. And so on what day was that again that you all decided to tie the knot?
So our wedding story is quite another story. It's a lot of many.
Ooh, okay.
Story. So initially we were going to get married on September 21st, 2013. That was the date that we had selected to get married. And the doctors were saying the same thing, you know, we don't know, it's not, you know, we're running out of options. We don't, but we really thought that he was going to make it, that he was going to outlive their expectations because he had done so far. And so I started planning. I went to the University of Maryland. I was able to reserve the chapel. It was a fee or something, but because I was an alumnus, I was able to reserve the chapel there. So I started planning for September 21st wedding. I had put down a deposit at like the Holiday Inn in College Park. I remember going out there and looking at it and all that kind of stuff. And like we didn't plan a honeymoon, but we definitely planned like having a real wedding and a real wedding reception. I mean, my friends had went to David's Bridal to pick stuff, and I ordered. It's funny because this is a confession, but sometimes women, you look at wedding dresses before you get married. And so I had already looked at wedding dresses, like probably sometime, I don't know, earlier in this courtship process. And so I already knew the dress I wanted. So when we went, I ordered the dress I wanted, and it wasn't supposed to come back until like a week before the wedding of September 21st.
Okay.
But he had, I think, another mini crisis. Maybe that next week or the week after that in August. And his doctor, it was a Friday, I remember this, he called me and he said, or did he call me or the doctor's office? Either his doctor called me or somebody called me, and they were like, she needs to talk to you. And I was like, she needs to talk to both of you. And I was like, okay. And I remember at this point, I could tell that she trusted me with him. Because she, you know, I had really been there since June on and off, and I could tell that she like really trusted me with him. So she was like, you know, Sheila needs to be here. We need to talk. I need to talk to both of you. So we arranged to talk to her on Monday. So on that Monday we went in, and that's when she told us like she's running out of treatments. That, you know, at this point she had went through all the chemos that she could go through, and the last thing they were trying was arsenic, which is something that in Japan or something, they had some studies. And, you know, at Johns Hopkins, Nick had volunteered to be a part of clinical trials. And one of the reasons why he was able to kind of get this on this transplant program. So a lot of the things they were doing some of them were novel, like things that were practice, but because of the type of hospital it is, they were like doing these different experimental things to seeing if something would work. So the arsenic was the last thing that they were trying. And at this point, he is only on the arsenic and this other pill called Hydrea. He was on that. But the Hydrea was very toxic and he couldn't stay on it. It was like the one drug that would kill his numbers, really, like it would wipe him out. But it was so toxic that it would like almost burn a hole in his throat. So he couldn't stay on it. Like he could be on it for like a few days and then they would have to take him off. Because if they kept him on it, like it would end up burning, like it was like high dose poison. So he couldn't stay on it. So at this point, maybe he was only doing those two. And she called us in and she said, the arsenic isn't working. And at that point, she'd gone through everything else. She doesn't have anything else. She essentially told us that to prepare for the worst. And she said, if you're going to get married, you need to get married very soon. And so I said, so you don't think he's going to make it to September 21st? And I remember having this very frank conversation with her. And she was like, no, I don't. I think it's very unlikely. And I think I may have asked her, like, well, how soon? What do you mean this soon? And she was like, as soon as possible. And so I said, so you don't think he's going to make it to the 21st? She said, no, I don't think so. And so I think at that point, at this point, they were asking us about hospice. They had been asking him about hospice for a minute. But he had been basically pushing back on them because he was like, no, he feels like it's giving up. And, he didn't want to give up. And so I think he said something similar to that effect again. And she was like, I can understand that. Okay. I think she ended up telling him, you can continue to come to the hospital to get the transfusions, the platelet transfusions and things like that, as long as you feel up to it. I think that's what she said. So at that point, that was a Monday. And I remember I called Topasia and I was like, she said, we need to move the wedding up till this week, basically. And Topasia was like, okay, so that's what you want to do. And I was like, yeah. So I think we talked about like how could we do it if it was possible. And I was like, see, check with, I think Debbie at our church had said we could have a wedding reception over her house when we were first talking about this. And so I was like, can you ask Debbie if we can have the wedding over there? She had talked to Debbie, she had talked to our pastors, different things like that. I had I had to finish with him and then I had to get him back to where he needed and make sure he was okay. And I think like by the time I talked to her again, she was like, okay, I have a pastor, I have a date. I'm a pastor, I have a date. I have and I was like, okay, so what is it? She was like, Thursday. I was like, okay.
Wow, so we now in Monday.
It's Monday.
And now we having a wedding on Thursday.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So I think it had just been a coincidence that my wedding dress came back early. And because they had to order it. And then it wasn't supposed to come back for another couple of weeks or something. And then I was gonna have to come in for alterations. So this was like Monday, I think I had to call, the wedding dress was in, and I was like, okay, so I'm getting married on Thursday. I'm gonna need like emergency alterations. Can you guys do that? And they were like, yes. So I remember I went to work that Tuesday. And so I told the girls to meet me at Davis Bridal because we were gonna have to get some bridesmaids dresses and go with whatever we could find. And it's funny because we had went before and it was a disaster. Like we weren't really able to find anything for them. I found my dress, but we weren't able to really find that much for them. And so when I got there, when I got off of work, they were all lined up and they all had on the same dress. And they were all looking at me like, and I was like, oh my God, you guys have dresses? They were like, yes. So it's crazy the way that things ended up lining up. Mm-hmm. And so we had the wedding. It was on August 29th, 2013, at Miss Debbie Epperson and Jim Epperson's house in their backyard. And by this point, Nick was pretty sick. So he had developed a new symptom where he had this pain in his feet, and it was hard for him to walk, some sort of nerve, something that was a side effect, we thought, of one of the medications or something like that. Mm-hmm. So we had the wedding. The wedding was really, really nice. I hadn't really talked to him because I had to get my hair done and had to dress. I was I remember the day of the wedding, I was up at 6 a.m. and I was out the door. We ended up getting married like 6 p.m. Something like that. Yep. So, there were 100 people there. Yep. We were able to have so many people. I had programs. I had it was just like a lot of people ended up stepping up and helping out. What was interesting during that time is I was moving as well. So I had just moved from where I was living to Darla's house.
Right.
Like, well, Nick, where are we going to live? Like, what are we where we would live. And we didn't know fully where we were going to live. I couldn't myself. My friends had stepped in and moved me on the day I was supposed to be moving because he was in the hospital and he wasn't doing it that best that day. And so I couldn't leave. And then, so they moved me like a couple weeks before that. So I just moved. So like half of my stuff was not packed, you know, it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
So we had the wedding. He wasn't, like I said, he wasn't doing well. I didn't realize how bad he was doing until right after the wedding, because I think we were taking pictures and he kind of got faint. And I was looking at his brothers like that's who I left him with, you know, like what's going on? Like what's wrong with him? What's going on? And, you know, he wasn't doing well. The thing with his feet was really painful for him. And so we didn't really get to have much of a wedding reception that people could participate in. It was probably the last time that a lot of people saw him, particularly the people that he had worked with. I know that was the last time they saw him. So you know, I had to try to get him to eat a little bit, get his fever. His fevers were spiking, which is, you know, something that would happen a lot with leukemia. The problem is when your fever spiked and your platelet count burns. So blaring down his platelet count, which would make him susceptible to getting easily bruised and stuff like that. And they had, at this point, the doctor told us she wasn't going to, you know, at this point she said he could keep coming. But he had just like got the platelet transfusion like the day before that or something like that. So we had to get him situated, get him like wait a couple of hours for him to get in a more stable condition. And I think what we were going to do was go back to the Hope. I had booked a hotel. What was the other name? Booked a hotel like in Baltimore. So we went there, but he wasn't doing well. And he wasn't walking well. He was having a lot of pain when he was walking. And so the next morning I called the doctor or he called her, she called back or something. She was like, well, he was supposed to be down here already for some appointments. And I was like, yeah, well, we can't, like, I don't even know how I'm going to get him there. And so she was like, okay, let's just bring him in to have him admitted. And so I remember that we were in a hotel, and so he couldn't really move that well. He couldn't walk that well, and I did not have a wheelchair. And I asked the hotel, they didn't have it, they didn't know where one was. And so I was like, how the heck am I going to get you to the car? And I think he was like, get the baggage cart. And I was like, okay. So
that was creative.
Yeah. So he basically sat, you know, on the luggage cart, and I wheeled that to the elevator, wheeled him all the way to the car. He got in the car, and that's how he got to that's how, you know, I was able to transport him. But that's how bad he was doing at that point. And then I had also noticed that on his legs, I was starting to see, I thought they were hives. And I remember being like, why do you have hives? Like, what is going on? What's breaking you out? At this point, he's still like very functional in terms of like, you know, present and things like that. But there was just the physical, like he was in a lot of pain and could not walk very well. And they had started him on a new medication to help with that, but it wasn't working yet. It was one of those that has to get in your system for a number of days kinds of medicines. So he went in, he got admitted. We were both there. I think we waited for her to come, the doctor, and she came and she said, that's when she told us that there's nothing else she could do. She couldn't treat him anymore, that she wasn't gonna be able to give him any more transfusions. Because I remember when she looked at him and I was like, at this point, he had swelling in his feet, but it was also swelling, whereas when we got married, I couldn't get the ring on his finger. And I had just measured his finger before I ordered the ring, like Topasia sold jewelry, so she had a ring size. I had just measured it and I knew what size to get for the ring, so that's how I got the ring. But I couldn't get it on his finger, so I remember I ended up putting it on his pinky finger. And so, you know, he had some swelling in his hands as well. And I was like, what are these hives on his legs? And she was like, those aren't hives. And I was like, well, what are they then if they're not hives? And she was like, those are leukemia cells. And I was like, she was like, it's spreading through, it's spreading, like it's spreading. And that's what that is. That's why you can see that. That's what it is. And she was like, it's spreading, it's too aggressive, nothing is working. I can do, I can't give him anything else. And I was like, so you won't give him any more fluids, you won't give him any more? And she was like, no, because he's dying. And that the more fluids I give him, the worse it's gonna be. And so I was like, okay. And I remember I was like, gave them like a moment, because they had been working together for a year, around maybe less, but seemed like a year by that point. And I know she really, really liked him, and she really cared about him. You know, he was awesome. It was hard not to. So everybody liked him. So it was really hard not to like him. And she really did. She really was like, I just really love him. Like, and, you know, I feel like she really tenderly cared about him, even though she was a doctor. You know, there would be times where she would ask him like, how are you? He'd be like, fine. And she'd be like, so I know that means you're not well. And she would look in his throat. And then that's what you could see, like how the pills were like burning through his throat, but he would never complain about it. So we really wouldn't know, you know? So that was just Nick. And so I still thought, I think she told me he probably isn't going to make it through the week. And I don't think I believed her. I still thought he was going to make it through the week. So I think we told everybody, the family, his brothers, everyone needed to tell the church. Then it just was, well, where are we going to go for him? Like, if he's not going to make it through the week, might be. We ended up going over to Andrews, so Paige and Paul's house, you know, and doing at-home hospice care, because we had the option of either doing the at-home hospice care or he could be admitted into a hospice center.
So why did you choose at home versus the facility?
I think he wanted to be in a more familiar kind of environment, and a more like with people he knew. And what they told us was you could start at home, and then if it got to a point where you needed to transition to the facility, like you could do that. And we had talked to the people on the phone and like all that, and made those arrangements and for the nurse to come and stuff like that. So I feel like we got married on a Thursday. The very next day is the day they said that he wasn't going to make it through the week. And then on the Sunday, that's when we left the hospital. That was the last time he left Johns Hopkins. So that time, that weekend was also our singles retreat for Calvary Chapel. And I remember Topasia I think she had gotten up there, and then I called her.
I remember, yep. Yeah. I remember that. I remember, we had gotten there that Friday night, and she was gone, within hours of being there, because she was going to be by your side, during this time and everything. So, yep, you're right. I remember
I called her, and I said, this is what she said. That was the first time. So we had went from earlier the week before, that Monday, saying, I don't know how much longer it's going to be, but I don't think he's going to make it to September 21st, to he's not going to make it through this next week. So, that obviously, really hard to process. I think for both of us, that was probably one of the only times where, he was really affected, and I remember talking to him and being like, how are you feeling? He was like, I just feel like I'm planning my death, and who wants to do that? But those were the kind of conversations that we had to have, because I had to know, like, what did he want and stuff like that. So that was really hard, and I remember calling Topasia, and she was like, I'm on my way. She'd just gotten up there. She was like, I'm coming back. I'll be back.
Yeah. And, Man, that's something, truly, as far as in, it's difficult. I mean, I've lost a couple of loved ones, and it's nothing better than to, especially in a case of if you still somewhat single. And in this case, you wasn't single, but you were, your husband was the one going through, so you almost were single. And just to see how not only the church family and your friends came together, but just everybody who came around to support both of you guys during this time. That was something that is a blessing to anybody, you know, that is going through anything, especially with us being on such a season now of not even social distancing. People are not even able to touch one another. So, you know, how important it was to have someone physically there to hold you up during this time and everything. So, yeah, definitely we can, you know, if you want to talk more about it, that's fine. But I just wanted, you know, like I said, I know that those last few days, so we after the wedding, we're now on Sunday. The Landrys have agreed to allow you all to come to their residence. And we're like at Monday at this point, Monday or Tuesday. And what is going on from there? If you wanna
Monday was Labor Day. I remember that. So a couple of people came. At this point on Monday, he was still lucid, he was still himself. I think the hospice nurse came, met him, introduced him, ordered a bed for him and all of that. Because she was like, at that point, I think we were staying in Landry's room, but she was like, I need to get a bed for him because, you know, the sicker he gets, this isn't going to work. So she ordered a bed for him. We put it in the living room. So Monday he was still okay. I remember I was crying. Like I was, you know, it's one of the things that the Lord does allow me when I'm in a crisis to kind of like be on, like, you know, just my gift kicks in and I'm just like functioning like, okay, this got to be done, the do. And that kind of happened through this whole relationship with him. I was on in a lot of ways, you know, but I remember just laying in the bed crying, like, I can't believe this. And, you know, he's dying and he's like, you know, it's okay, you know, and this is what he would always say these last few days. He would say, God has a plan. We just don't know what it is. And he would say that. And I'm like, okay, how do you say that? And I'm crying. And, you know, and he's being strong for me, even though, you know, he's dying. And so I think, you know, from that point in June when he lost his vision and I went into the bathroom at the hospital and I was like, I cannot do this, Lord. I don't know what you're asking me to do. But at that point, they were like, he's not gonna make it. And I was crying and I was like, I can't do this. But after that, like I was just like, I'm here, I'm with him, like we're gonna do this together. And so, you know, I never waver from that, like from that point in June. And so, you know, it was difficult. And he was like, you know, we had conversations and he was like, you know, he felt bad about like the fact that this was going to be a big burden for me, like for him to die and me to be here with the pain. And I remember being like, you know, it's okay. You know, I can deal with this. I had no idea. It sounds so stupid to say now because I had no idea like what was about to happen and how deeply it was going to affect me. I mean, I knew it was going to affect me deeply, but there was nothing that could have prepared me for what actually happened with him. So that was Tuesday. Tuesday was probably Monday. Monday he was good. Tuesday, I think he slept a lot more, but he was still himself. I feel like maybe Tuesday nights is when it started to be like he started to be more under and less like he wasn't, you know, like he was fading and he was in pain, you know. So one of the hardest things for me, because they give you a kit when they go on hospice and there's like a morphine, they teach you how to use it. So I was having to give it to him. And I think maybe by Wednesday is when it started getting, it was harder for me. It was harder to keep his pain under control with the stuff. So he didn't have a good day on Wednesday. You know, it gets really bad after that. He didn't have a good day on Wednesday. He had stopped eating at that point. And it just started going, really, really bad.
So Wednesday, Thursday, when was the actual date that he ended up transitioning to the Lord from that Wednesday?
September 6th. September 6th, 2013. And I want to say it was a early Saturday morning. So Wednesday started getting really bad. Thursday was terrible. Or was it Friday? Was that a Friday or a Saturday? I have to look up and see what day it was.
Okay.
A Friday when he passed.
Okay.
Friday. I think Thursday was a day where I was exhausted and I really couldn't and I was overwhelmed with not being able to keep him comfortable, and his brothers were there. It wasn't just me, the Lantrys were there, his brothers were there. But it was just really weighing on me that I couldn't keep him comfortable. And I remember I called the hospice a couple of times because there was a whole thing that they go through when they're transitioning, and it's really scary to you on the outside because it sounds like it sounds like they're in a lot of pain. And they were like, that's normal, he's okay. And I'll be like, you can't be okay. So it was really difficult for me. Those 2 days were really, really hard. I was exhausted. Even though I think I slept on the couch near him, but if I would hear him moan, I would be up. So I didn't really get any sleep or anything like that. So I think it was Thursday evening, one of my friends came over and Debbie came over. And that's when everything just hit the fan then. Things got a lot worse. And it got to a point where we weren't going to be able to care for him at home anymore. I don't think he ever wanted to go to the hospice. He wanted to stay home. Mm-hmm. There was no way that he could stay home because we couldn't help him anymore. Right. So I called, and when you make the call for the hospice, they're never coming back. So you have to, we had to have a conversation to be is this what we're going to do? And I remember having to talk to and it was my call to make because I was now his wife, And I remember talking to his brothers about it, and they were like, just do what you think is the best thing to do. And I was like, okay, we need to get him in there because I can't, you know what I mean? My goal was to get him to the hospice and get him sedated. So right. At least not be suffering. That's what I wanted because there was nothing I could do anymore to keep him. So we took the ambulance ride there, and that was probably late at night, maybe Thursday night, maybe midnight, 11, something like that. And I think he passed that night. So sometime maybe 3 or 4. So it didn't get
AM or PM?
AM.
Okay.
So he never actually saw the hospice doctor. So when we got there was the person that was on call for the evening. And they were like, the doctor will come in the morning and talk to you. And I was like, just sedate him. I just want him sedated. And they were like, well, the doctor wants, they don't do that. They have to talk to you because you have to sign off on stuff. And I was like, I don't, just tell them to sedate him. And they couldn't do it. And so I was like, okay, we're going to be up here at this hospice. Who knows how long? And I remember, he didn't make it. So I was in the room. Topacia was in the room. Some of his brothers were in the room. It got a lot worse than it was even before that. And then all of a sudden, it just got quieter until he passed. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what happened. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And after that, you don't process that kind of thing right away. So I guess I was in shock. I was exhausted. I was a lot of things. The interesting thing is that I had one of my friends at work had come to me after we got engaged and was like, Sheila, I want you to take time off, take some time, take a month off and just spend time with Nick, and I will handle everything here for you. She's also one of the friends that came when things were getting really bad. She had some experience with hospice. So, she was able to be there for me. And I was already planning on taking the next month off for what I thought was going to be, to spend time with him while he was, going through this process. But I never got to spend any time with him. I did, but the whole time he was, in the transition process. My whole legs felt weak, like I felt wobbly and weak. So it was really a difficult time. It was really hard. The only thing I could say is, it was never a point where I was by myself.
That's true. That's true.
So, I was never by myself. There was, his family or, my close friends, like there were always like, people around through that whole process, through the whole week when we went through that. And, I thank God for that because, we all had to kind of be strong for him. And that was my thing, during the time where I knew he was like, we have to do this. We have to be strong. Like, you know what I mean? It was hard. He didn't want to go. And, that's what the nurse at the hospice kept saying because he was young. That's why because I was like, what is happening?
Mm-hmm.
Anything like when I asked the question of the doctor, what is this going to look like? That day when she told me he wasn't going to make it through the week, I specifically said, so what should I be preparing myself for? What is this going to look like? And what I was told and what happened were completely night and day, completely. I was under the impression that he was just going to lose conscious little by little, and that at one point he just wouldn't wake up. That was what I understood that they were describing to me was going to happen because he was going to be on the medication, and so at some point he just won't wake back up, and that's not what happened.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. I mean, such a impactful event in your life, and it transcends from not only dealing with you in a romantic way, but it also in a more administrative way, a caregiving way. I mean, you touched pretty much every part of emotion in you during this time. So here we are now, past that, you're ready to, lay the rest. You got through that. Like I said, you said you was exhausted that day. I'm pretty sure it took you several days to try to process something like that happening in your life. And, luckily, this, like I said, prayerfully and gratefully, you had people that were there to pick up some of those pieces that you was just not able to do. You have done the work at that point that the Lord had called you to in every sense. I mean, that is such a honorable task that you took on. I mean, you literally laid your life down for another during that time, and it didn't, it doesn't go unrewarded, without a doubt. The Lord has definitely shown you favor, and I know that, you're still processing. I mean, I'm pretty sure that happened in 2013. We're now, 2020, and, what do you hope to see for your future? Do you desire marriage again? Through this process, do you still desire kids? What is your future endeavors or desires for your life in the life of a single woman?
So for a while, I guess I could say I was like, I don't want to get married again. Part of it is because I feel like through everything that I've been through, it's caused me to be very firm and solid in like who I am, what my gifts are, what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, what I'm going to deal with and what I'm not going to deal with. And, because I was with someone like Nick, who was I felt very secure with him. I felt very accepted. I felt like, he understood me in and out, and like he accepted all parts of me. And, in some ways I'm, and I'm older now, right? So I'm more like, I feel like steadfast in some of my convictions and more steadfast in like what I know that I want and what I don't want. And so in some ways I feel like, you know, that might be what some people might consider a mountain of expectations that they would have to meet. And so until recently I was like, you know, I'm fine. I don't need to be married anymore. Like I'm, you know, because I don't want to go, I feel like I don't have the resources. One of the ways that this has changed me significantly, and not just this, because, you know, I had my own medical crisis myself, like less than a year after this, or maybe a little bit more than a year after this. But, you know, so those experiences have caused me to be, you know, very like in tune with what I can deal with, what I can't. And also, like, I feel like changed me in ways, you know, I know that after Nick passed, I was so exhausted, and not just physically exhausted, like I was mentally exhausted, emotionally exhausted, you know, not a big crier. I felt like I didn't recognize myself for like 2 years because all I did was cry, you know, and it was painful and I needed to cry. You know, but, and then, you know, I had a whole thing that I went through with the Lord, with what the heck, how could you let this happen? What happened? Like it was just a lot of things that I had to go through in my relationship with the Lord to even like be able to, you know, be able to think about, getting married again wasn't something that I even considered until recently, to be honest. And so I guess, you know, what I could say is, have I considered getting married again? If you would ask me this last year, I would say I don't think so. But now I think that I would consider getting married again. But I think I would consider getting married again under certain scenarios and circumstances. And so I don't know that I expect to get married again, you know, but you know, because yeah, I don't, but I'm open, I'm open to the idea of it. In terms of kids, you know, I've told myself a long time ago that not a long time ago, but some years ago, that I may not have biological children. Part of that is obviously I was marrying a man with advanced cancer, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And that can affect certain things. And so that was something I had to grapple with then when entertaining the relationship. But also, like, given my own medical history and, you know, only having one kidney now, and now my age, I don't know, you know, that and I have less of a biological desire to have children than I did, like, obviously, when I was in my 20s. You know, I'm a lot more settled in like my life the way that it is now. That doesn't mean that I'm not opposed to having kids. It's a guess, you know, but I just don't think I'm gonna have children. And we'll see. That would be very interesting. I'll say that. If I did.
I understand. Trust me, you know I understand.
But yeah, I'm willing to have some stepchildren now. That I know.
I said the same thing. I remember in my 20s, I was like, no kids. I ain't date no guy who had no kids. Then when I got in my 30s, I was like, well, he can have one, you know, kid. And then my 40s, I'm like, look, I need them to be grown. And now I'm about to approach my 50s. I'm like, please don't have no kids if you don't have it. You know what I'm saying? As far as in have your own kids, because I just don't, my body, for one, wouldn't produce it. But more importantly, I don't mentally want to do it. So
it's a different mindset. It definitely is now.
Definitely is a different mindset. Yeah. Well, you know, Sheila, once again, you know, you've definitely had a story that of love, loss, tragedy, and yet still hope. And that is the message that I get from you just sharing your story with us. So I just thank you again for your time. I thank you for being transparent. I hope I didn't bring up too much, you know, in your heart, but, you know, let us rejoice. Just like you said, Nick's birthday is coming around the corner, and I'm pretty sure it's not a birthday or different date that comes up that you still don't think about Nick. And same is for his friends. You know, we think about him often as well. And so one of the things that I was encouraged by doing the process, probably right after he passed, is seeing a picture that he was wearing a shirt that said, "I'm okay." And that right there is just what everybody needed to see. I think that loved him. It's just that, you know, even though he's not present with us in the physical, he's always with us in his heart. So once again, thank you for sharing your story with us. Okay.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, God is still faithful. One thing I can say is, you know, I went through a process with my grieving where my faith was, you know, challenged in a lot of ways. And there were times where I would, because it was so much I didn't understand, you know, about what happened. And I was just like, I don't understand, Lord. Like, how could you let somebody like him go through this? Like, it was bad enough he was going to die. Why? You know, and of course, everybody goes through that, you know, but one of the things that I feel like I never got an answer to that. So I will be honest. It's not like the Lord ever said, because of this, that's never happened. But one of the things that did happen and has happened is, like, you know, when I was going through, and this was a years long, like, kind of struggle that I was having, is I realized, like, you know, there's a scripture in John 10 where it says, you know, that, you know, was one where it talks about he's the good shepherd. And it says, like, we hear his voice and no one can snatch us out of his hands. And there were times where I would be like, I'm about to give up on this Christian thing. I don't really understand, like, what happened. And I felt forsaken in a lot. Like, that's how I felt. Yeah. And one of the things that the Lord told me, and kind of like still tells me, is that I can't even snatch myself out of his hands. That he's like, you know, he is keeping me. If I am a child of his, then I'm in his hands. And like, can't even snatch myself. And he didn't let me. And so there is a lot of hope in that. Like, you know, there's a lot of things I still don't have the answer to, and I'm not going to have the answer to probably on this side of eternity. But for Nick, people have asked me, I remember his sister asked me one time, like, will you do this again? And I wouldn't ask anyone to go through what I went through. I would not, because it was horrible, just be honest. But I would do anything for Nick, you know what I mean? And so I'm glad that I was able to make him happy when his life was at its worst, you know what I mean? And so for that, I'm really grateful that God used me. And, you know, and I'm not going to trade that for the world. So thank you. I appreciate you having me. And I'm at the verge, but I didn't cry yet. So
look, I'm gonna stop it. If you want to cry, you go ahead.